Epilogue, although it gives us a lot of the results for all the different characters and where they're going to end up, I think it's most important for the themes that we've been discussing to look at the death of Ilyusha. We have seen that the death of suffering children has been the big question about whether or not there can be a good God. And Dostoevsky began writing the Brothers Karamazov to deal with the death of his own son, Alyosha. He has a litany given by Ivan as a form of rebellion to protest God's goodness and God's sovereignty based on the fact that there are so many children suffering. We see the death of Markel, Zosima's younger brother or elder brother, and this loss is what stays in his soul as a memory. This goodness of Markel in facing his death and loving all people and saying we're all responsible for everyone becomes the impetus for Zosima himself actually taking on suffering, for giving up the duel, for giving up that licentious life, for saving the murderer who comes to him at night, for not fearing murderers, for asking forgiveness from Dmitri, who was supposed to become a murderer. So we have the death of young children can also be a saving grace in someone's soul. And we looked at how in Book 10, we have lots of young children who are being impressionable and we don't know which direction they're going to go. In the same way that we've kind of walked through the journeys of the brothers, Dmitri, Alyosha, and Ivan, to see where they were going and whether they were going to follow the steps of Fyodor or to follow the steps of Zosima. Now we have these boys at the end, and when they are mourning the loss of Ilyusha, the death of a young suffering child, are they going to go the way of Alyosha or the way of Ivan? And they're standing there, and Alyosha gives a rousing speech at the stone of Ilyusha's grave. And he says, right now I should be with my two brothers, one of whom is going into exile and the other is lying near death. But he says, but let us agree here by Ilyusha's stone that we will never forget and we will always remember. And this is what he charges them with, is to remember Ilyusha. Perhaps beautiful, sacred memory preserved from childhood is the best education. We think of what Alyosha's memory was, his mother holding him before the icon with the slanting rays of sun, and this preserved memory he held onto, a mother's love. Dmitri, before he is going to kill Fyodor, he says, perhaps it was others' tears or perhaps the prayers of my mother that saved me. And here we have again Alyosha charging that beautiful, sacred memory preserved from childhood is the best education. If a man stores up such memories to take into life, he is saved for his whole life. And even if only one good memory remains with us in our hearts, that alone may serve someday for our salvation. That's on page 774. So as they're burying Ilyusha, he asks that this memory alone keep these boys from great evil. To remember that once they were kind, they were brave, they were honest. Perhaps this great memory of the way they responded to Ilyusha's death will save them later in life. Let us never forget, and may his memory be eternal. In the Russian Orthodox theology, remembering is to bring back. It is in some ways a resurrection, is to remember. To bring people back to mind is to bring people back to life. And Alyosha says how good life is when you do this, when you do something good and rightful, like memorying eternal, bringing them back eternally, eternal life here being thought of as the prize, the memory that they're really supposed to focus on. And Kolya even asks, sounding very much like Ivan or Rakitin, but a younger, more impressionable version, he's saying, can it really be true that we shall all rise from the dead and come to life and see one another again, and everyone in Ilyusha as well? Certainly we shall rise. Certainly we shall see gladly and joyfully, and we tell each other all that has been. Alyosha replies, and he laughs, half in ecstasy. And this is similar to the ecstasy he felt when he left the dead body of Zosima and walked out wanting to embrace everyone. Our oppositions have been set. When you go the way of facing death and mystery, Why is the wee one crying? Why can't I help the suffering child? But you go forth with tenderness and put the pillow before, beneath the head of a murderer, or you give water to the person who is thirsty. You help the beggar. You save the young girl who is hammering her finger in a door. And when you go forward and you show love, you kiss the aging Grand Inquisitor on the mouth. When you do these acts of love, you are bringing forth the potential for eternal life, for salvation, for resurrection, and community. Community that eats together, eating pancakes. You have very Eucharistic symbology here. An ancient, eternal tradition, hand in hand, we will go forward, celebrating joy, the marriage of Cana, this eternal idea. Water becomes wine. Everything here is miraculous. It's joy-filled. It's lifting up our eyes to something that's beyond Ilyusha, beneath the earth, and the stone that marks his grave, and the sorrow and the grief that is there, that is not forgotten, but it's held onto with this hope for resurrection. That's a beautiful communal ending of this novel. One that shows all the grim and shows all the heartache and asks all the biggest and toughest questions, and yet ends with hurrah for Karamazov, hurrah for memory eternal. And but without any sense that this is a false ending, that we are having a false joy that's not founded on what Dostoevsky said about his own faith, that his faith has gone through a crucible of doubt. We go through the doubts of Ivan, we ask the big questions that Dmitri asks, Madonna or Sodom, it plagues my heart. But hopefully we can come to the same conclusions of Alyosha and of all these boys and say, hurrah, memory eternal, resurrection.